Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. One of the things Lent is most about is to help us grow in our awareness that we are broken vessels. The more we are aware of our brokenness, the more we are aware that we don't measure up to who we are supposed to be, and the more we acknowledge how far we have fallen away from God, the more we grow in our awareness of our need for grace. Maybe that should be said, the more we grow in our hunger and thirst for grace. The season of Lent reminds us of all of this, of our need for God to save us. So this week we'll focus on that word broken and some various ways it plays out in the gospel story. Let's start with the nard. We've heard this story before. In Mark 14, we encounter the story of Mary taking a jar of expensive perfume called nard and anointing Jesus' feet while Judas fumed that this was a terrible waste. We know it, but probably we have only a vague idea about nard. It was some kind of perfume, we think, but not just any kind of perfume. Nard was imported. It came from northern India, from a plant that grew there at the foot of the Himalayas. It wasn't cheap. Mary had almost 12 ounces of it, worth about a year's wages. By today's standards, it was worth not hundreds of dollars, but tens of thousands of dollars. It was wonderfully fragrant, a special, unique, lavishly expensive perfume. Now, let's talk about the jar. Back then, this precious nard was bottled in a glass-like, translucent alabaster flask or bottle with no lid. This bottle was sealed as one piece, the nard encased within. It did not have a screw top, a wax plug, or even a cork. There was only one way to open it. Snap off the top. It was a single-use dispenser. There was no way to use just a bit, no way to save some for later. So Mary used it, pouring it, all 12 ounces of it, over Jesus' feet and hair. It must have been shocking. Judas was the one who objected to this waste of resources, but when Matthew tells the story, he tells us that Judas was speaking only what all the disciples thought. Surely there were better things to do with something of such value. Surely, if she wanted to use it, there were good practical things that could have been done with it. They could have sold it and used the money to feed the poor. They could have helped people after some disaster. And it's hard to argue with them. But Jesus did. In fact, Jesus praised what she had done, this liberal outpouring of perfume to honor him. She has anointed me for burial, he said. But Jesus also seemed to know that what was going on was much, much more. Jesus knew that the real broken vessel in this story was not the jar of nard. No, the jar was just a symbol of the true broken vessel, Mary herself. In her love for Jesus, and in her singular desire to serve and honor him, Mary was holding nothing back. Like the broken jar that had to be completely spent once it was broken, so Mary could keep back not one thing in her devotion. She gave herself completely and unreservedly to Jesus. Mary was doing what broken vessels do. They give everything in response to the love of God in Jesus. That's the trust that Jesus calls us to, a trust that asks us to put ourselves, our lives, and all that we have and all that we are into Jesus' hands. It's a trust that holds nothing back. We are broken vessels, shattered by our sin, and Jesus tenderly, patiently, lovingly picks up the pieces of our lives to make us whole again. That's love. That's grace. That's Jesus. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.